Hey kids, who wants to talk about aliens? And by that I of course mean the theory of alienation within the political economy. Oh, you don't? Well, we're gonna, so. Now, if you live in the modern world, like me, you probably spend a lot of time behind your screens, and really, why wouldn't you? I mean, everything that we need and love nowadays exists in the digital space. Why would I go outside and touch grass when I have all the grass that I need right here? So when I had the chance to interview one of my peers earlier in the year, I had no doubt she would have all of her own experiences and opinions when it came to technology. When the theme of discussion switched to advertising in the online space, though, I noticed a pattern in some of her responses. See if you can spot them.
With all the forms of money making on the internet nowadays, through information and actually through viewer engagement stats, would you say that it's easier or more difficult to make money through the internet?
I think it definitely has become much easier. Almost anything that you come across is technically an advertisement. There's so many brands out there now that they are appealing more creatively.
Would you say that it's more dangerous for a consumer nowadays to, avoid these advertisements, avoid, the hidden ways internet content creators are trying to gain revenue from the consumers? Or would you say that things were more dangerous back when it was more direct advertising to the consumer?
I definitely think you lose a sense of privacy now because everything is so accessible. You're not getting that interactivity with I would say maybe a salesperson. You're not getting that anymore.
So the theme of the discussion is violations of online privacy, and losing interactivity with other people, and advertisers continuing to find ways to target us with ads whether or not we know it. Do you hear concern at all? I noticed throughout not only this interview, but through interviews with some of my other student peers that while the topics of discussion ranged, the theme was generally focused on the internet, and each and every one sort of had this conclusion that corporations gaining more and more control over the digital space and our digital rights was inevitable. It got me thinking about one of the texts that we read in class, the Cyberspace's Architectural Constitution. The lecturer was giving this inspired take on how the internet should embody democracy and creativity for the people, and how large corporations and the hands of the few holding all the control was a massive threat to our freedom. It just seems like a far cry from the responses I was getting in my interviews is all. The difference in time between that lecture being given and my interviews with other students being performed was only about a generation or so, and that much change in reaction taking place in such a short amount of time only raised more questions. And when I have questions about the political economy, I turn to Karl Marx. Who doesn't? The estrangement of the worker and his object is expressed according to the laws of political economy in the following way. The more the worker produces, the less he has to consume. The more value he creates, the more worthless he becomes. The more his product is shaped, the more misshapen the worker. The more civilized his object, the more barbarous the worker. The more powerful the work, the more powerless the worker. The more intelligent the work, the duller the worker, and the more he becomes a slave of nature. That was one of but many ways Marx tries to explain his theory of alienation within the political economy. And in essence, what he's trying to say here is that as the economy refines with time, the producing class grows less and less involved with the labor, whereas the laboring class, who becomes more and more involved with the creation of the product, loses their own humanity. The internet was still fairly new when Cyberspace's Architectural Constitution was first published in the year 2000, but since the transition from Web 1.0 to 2.0 to 3.0, we've seen rapid change take place. New careers and financial opportunities are always opening up on the internet, and with them come the study of how they change over time as the industry continues to build. To me, this at least partially explains why the responses from so many of my student peers seem so indifferent. I mean, after all, it's much harder to fight corporations online nowadays than it was 25 years ago. They're much larger and more powerful than they were. Does this mean that the digital economy has perfectly followed Marx's statement that as the product becomes more powerful, the laborer becomes more powerless? I'm not really sure. I think I would need a much more in-depth analysis of much more complicated things to fully understand that, but I'd like to think that it's at least a worthy comparison. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to go back to my dark side of the room and my half-empty glass.